Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SEO Keywords, Understanding the User's Search Intent. My name is Nalini Goolsarran, and I'm your facilitator this evening. I am the founder of Edge Space Marketing, a digital marketing agency in Stamford, Connecticut. We work with small businesses on nonprofits on what I like to call the entire digital ecosystem. Some of you may have been with me the last 2 weeks as we talked about SEO basics, and last week we spoke about understanding your Google tools. And today we're going to talk about the keyword intent. Everybody tells you to find your keywords, but the question is, how do you find the right keywords? And that's what we're going to talk about today, the different types of keywords, how they're used, where they're used, and why you want to use them. So today we're going to talk briefly about what is SEO. We're going to talk about understanding the user's search intent. We're going to talk about the different types of search intent, and then how to identify them. Right? It's one thing for me to tell you to find your keywords. It's another thing for you to figure out how do you actually find your keywords using the intention behind it. And then of course, we're gonna talk a little bit more about just getting started with how you do that. For those of you who were with me last week, you will see some things repeated around Google Trends. But as I mentioned last week, it's gonna come more into context now. So the searches that I was recommending last week, and I'm gonna use the exact same example. So if you're familiar with last week's example, it'll probably make a little bit more sense today. So let's talk about SEO. What is it? The real question is, are you on page 1 of Google? 69% of all online experiences begin with a search engine. Did you know that SEO drives 1,000% more traffic than organic social media? So you still get traffic from your social media and they work hand in hand, but SEO is a big driving factor behind that. And interestingly enough, Instagram now has its own version of SEO. It's now used as a buzzword. It's not exactly SEO because it's not a search engine, but their search functionality has its own built-in SEO now. Less than 1% of Google searchers click on the results from page 2. Think about your own search behavior. I go to page 2 simply because what I do for a living, I just like to see what's out there. But if you're using this as just an end user, as yourself, what you're searching for, chances are if you didn't find what you're looking for on page 1, you've gone ahead and changed your search criteria and searched for something else. 53% of all website traffic comes from organic search, not paid advertising. And this number is probably even higher now. These stats are a little outdated. They're about a year outdated. I tried to find some new versions of it, but they're not yet available. But imagine that over 50% of your traffic is coming from Google, not just from your social media or your newsletter or any other avenue which you drive traffic. Around 70% of search queries contain 4 or more words. This is really important. Often when people think about their keywords, they think of keywords as singular, 1 keyword, 2 keywords, or maybe digital marketing as a keyword, rather than digital marketing near me, digital marketing for small businesses. That's 5 in a row. So there's keywords and then there's keyword phrases. And so this is where the 4 or more words come in. Where to buy and near me mobile queries grew over 200% from 2017 to 2019. I tried to find an updated statistic for this to see what it's like in 2022, and it's so high, there's no number. The reality is this is a big driving factor around Google and Amazon and Siri. We're often using voice search to tell us these things. We're in our cars, we're on the go. Even when we're home, it's just become very easy and convenient. In fact, Google even starts to recommend it when you're looking for things. 92% of global traffic comes from Google Search, Google Images, and Google Maps. So if you have a Google My Business listing, whether it's a physical location or a virtual business with a service area, your Google Maps is where your Google My Business listing is listed, because instead of having a pin drop for a physical location, you might have a service area outline. So if you're hyper local, global, national, international, it matters. So how does SEO work? This is always the main question. The goal is to increase the quality and quantity of traffic to your website. So it's not just about any and all traffic. You are better off having 100 qualified users come to your website, meaning 100 people who are more than interested in doing business with you or interested in looking you up, rather than 1,000 people who have no idea who you are, have no real reason to end up on your website other than it was an accident. What that will cause is a higher bounce rate. It may cause you to get deranked for your actual keywords. So not all traffic is good traffic. Keep that in mind. And if you've not taken my SEO basics workshop where we talk about the ranking factors, you might want to go back and check that out, because we do talk about all the different things that go into that and why having the right traffic impacts your ranking. So the way it works is that Google is crawling the web. It is gathering information about all the content and all the websites out there. And if you have your own website and you've submitted your sitemap to Google, chances are you got indexed fairly recently. If you didn't submit your sitemap, go ahead and try to do that. Last week's class, we talked about it specifically. This is basically a list of everything on your website. And instead of waiting at the back of the line for Google to index you, you move to the front of the line and you get indexed sooner than later. So now that Google has this giant library of information, when a person wants some information, they go to Google, Siri, Amazon. Even if they're using Siri and Amazon, a lot of times they're using a Google search engine on the back end. So they type in or they say what they're looking for. The information that Google has already indexed is fed through their algorithm. Your query is fed through the algorithm. And somehow on the other end, Google spits out certain search results. And that's where you want to show up. When somebody types in something, Google goes through its index, pulls up your website and says you're a match for their search. This is where we're talking about search intent and search criteria and why it matters. So some important aspects of your SEO. You want to identify your keywords with search intent in mind. You want to configure your on-site and off-site SEO. So these are your ranking factors. And at the very end, I'll give you a couple tips about where certain things may go. You want to configure your Google Analytics. You want to submit your sitemap to the Google Search Console. And you want to set up your Google My Business. These are important parts of your SEO. Even if you don't understand all of the ranking factors, try to at least get a few of them done. It'll all help you in the end. So let's get talking about search intent. How do we think like your target audience? So ultimately, what you want to do with search intent, what is it? Why do I need it? Why is it so important? You want to satisfy search intent. That is Google's #1 goal. That is what Google is expecting. That is what Google wants from you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Your search intent is the why behind a search query. People come to Google for different reasons. And if you understand why they came to Google, then you'll understand what they're going to search for. The what and the why go hand in hand, and they're very important. The main goal is it's the person's main goal when they're typing into a search engine, whether it's looking for something, trying to buy something, and we'll get into what those are in a moment. You want to write content that fits both the terms people are searching for as well as the search intent of your audience. So if I were to use myself as an example, I provide digital marketing services to small businesses. I have a keyword of digital marketing, and I could just use digital marketing, but I know people are probably looking for SEO best practices, SEO ranking factors. In fact, there was a question that just came through on the chat, which I'll get to in a moment, is how do I know if my sitemap is submitted correctly? Those are some things that will allow you to maybe come up with blogs, come up with different places to put H1, H2 tags. This is where you get your indicators from. What are people asking and why do they want to know? So your user satisfaction is ultimately what matters. Google's primary ranking factors are relevance, authority, and user satisfaction. Your SEO ranking factors still matter, but if your page does not satisfy search intent, it's not going to rank. So what does that really mean? That means that if you got ranked in Google or someone ends up on your website for a certain search criteria and they don't find what they're looking for, chances are they're leaving right away and they're going back to Google to find something else. Remember, Google's tracking everybody's traffic. They know when you've left, they know when you've come back, they know when you've gone to another site. All of these work for you or against you. So your website content and design both factor into this. So that means that, is your website well designed? Does it load fast? Is it easy to navigate? Is it visually appealing? These are all things when we talk about content and design. Often people have the right words, but it's poorly designed. And sometimes I've seen the reverse, where it's well designed, but it has poor content, meaning it's a lot of jargon, it's confusing, it's speaking to each other, it's not speaking to the customer. For example, if you're a doctor and it's using tons of medical terms that are hard to understand, then the marketing is for other doctors. That language is for other doctors. It's not for the common layman. So this is where content and design come in handy. If you do have your Google Analytics configured, it's going to be important for you to take a look at it and figure out what your bounce rate is. Your bounce rate is a good indicator if something is right or wrong on your website. So your bounce rate, just to cover it really quickly, think of a bouncing ball. When you drop a ball on a surface, it immediately comes back, it bounces. Google is viewing your user traffic with the same thing in mind. They came to your website, they didn't go to any other page, they didn't stay for more than a few seconds, and they left me. And then they probably went to another website. Google's thinking, okay, so one of two things is wrong. The content probably doesn't match the search criteria. The design was poor. It took too long to load. These are all your ranking factors that come into play. So that's why it's so important to, one, take a look at your Google Analytics, see what's happening. A high bounce rate is not good. You're looking for a bounce rate between 50 and 70% roughly. Anyone other than an e-commerce website very rarely ends up with a bounce rate close to 0%. It's never really happened. Even e-commerce websites don't have that. So what are the types of search intent? This is really the crux of it. You've got informational intent, which is where someone is looking for information on a topic. Very quick example of that is gardening best practices. Someone is looking for information on how to build a home garden maybe, and maybe that's not the right search term. Maybe that's a little too broad. Maybe it's one of several search terms you need to add to your list. You also have navigational intent. A navigational intent is when someone is searching for a specific website or business. So I made up a business here called Stanford Garden Center. And what that means is, for example, I do it all the time. I go to Google, instead of typing in edgespacemarketing.com, I go to Google and I type in Edgespace Marketing. It's the first result and I click it. So what they're trying to do is they're searching for something to navigate to it. So they're searching for a business to navigate to their website. They're searching for a business to navigate to their Google My Business to get their hours or phone number. That's what the navigational search. Then you have a transactional search, which is where they're searching for a product or brand. They're searching for information, but in kind of an investigatory capacity. So it's more like, where do I buy lavender plants near me? Where do I buy Adidas shoes? And I'll show you some really specific examples in a moment. You also have commercial investigation intent. So this is where they're not, like in the transactional intent, they're looking to go buy those shoes. But in the commercial investigation intent, they're looking for reviews on those shoes. They may be comparing one version of the Nike to one version of the Adidas shoes. Who knows? This is where they're looking for things near me. It's where they're looking at your reviews. Now, knowing what falls into what category is not necessarily important. What's more important is that it gives you some guidelines for how to develop these keywords. So let's take a look at what that could look like. Before we do that, the slides, I missed the slide. Let's talk about your keyword modifiers. So your modifiers typically indicate the type of search intent. So we just talked about really high level. These are your transactional, informational, commercial, and navigational search intent. So your modifiers help you indicate that. And you want to use natural language when developing these keywords. In the past, when we would develop keyword phrases, we kind of write them a little disjointedly. We wouldn't write in complete sentences. We would leave off the for, to, does. You need all of those words now. Google is moving more towards what's called natural language processing. It means that it's trying to teach its algorithm and its AI to speak like human beings so that we can better match our search results. So if you speak naturally, Google is interpreting it naturally, and the end result is a natural match. So what are some of the modifiers? In the informational space, we're talking about how, who, what, when, well, not so much when, but where, why, guides, tips, tutorials, ideas, and examples. So For example, for lack of a better word, in my world, this may be web design tips, web design best practices, social media strategy tips, how to grow an email list. These are ways of using that modifier to fill in the blanks for what people might be searching for. On the navigational side, we're talking about a brand name, a business name, name of a product, a name of a service. So for me, that could be not digital marketing, edge space marketing. That is the name of my brand and my business. In my case, it might be a service, web development, search engine optimization, social media management. So depending on what your business is, you may fall into any one of those four or one of the four, one or two actually. You should always have a business and a service or a business and a product. I'm going to assume somewhere along those lines for any business. On the transactional side, this is where people are looking to buy things. They're looking for coupons. They're looking to order things. When you're thinking of a type of store, we're thinking like within the city. So Stanford blank. So Stanford chiropractor, Stanford physical therapist. That's an example of some type of transactional things that people might be looking for. And of course, price comparison. A lot of times people are looking for that. On the commercial side, you have keyword modifiers like best, top, reviews, comparison, this versus that. These are just typical examples. They're very, very broad. You're going to need your specificity in that space. But these modifiers, they either go before or after your service or your product or your business type. It's kind of a way to help you figure out how to generate your keyword list. So here's some examples that I was going to mention earlier. So on the informational side, these are all broad ranges of topics to kind of give you an idea in case one resonates more than the other. On the informational side, we have examples like how many calories are in an apple? The keyword modifier being how. The next one is strategies to grow an email list. In this case, the keyword modifier is strategies because we're trying to figure out how to grow that list. Think of the word strategies and how kind of interchangeably in that particular phrase. And it's possible that if that's a keyword phrase that you're targeting, you might need both how to grow an email list and strategies to grow an email list. You've got best paleo recipes, best being the keyword modifier, when to plant lettuce, when being the keyword modifier. On the navigational side, we have edge space marketing, the Darien library, Instagram login, Gmail. These are things that you might type into the search bar, and then the first item that comes up should be what you're looking for to find that particular website. On the commercial side, we've got things like iPhone versus Android. Maybe you're trying to compare features, maybe they're trying to compare pricing. This one you might have to drill down to another layer to make sure you're having the right keywords identified, because maybe you're writing a blog on that topic if that's your business. We also have things like digital marketing for small business near me. This is another example of where it could be digital marketing for small businesses near me. The pluralization of that word matters. You might get a different search result for the singular and another search result for the plural. Sometimes they match, but it's very important to think about those variations, because if there is a difference in how they perform, you're going to want to make sure you have those on your list and code for both of those. Another example on commercial side are Samsung 22 reviews. And it's interesting, best drone cameras show up on the commercial side rather than the informational side. Now, these can go hand in hand. The difference is that best paleo recipes is about recipes, right? On the commercial side, best drone cameras, it's probably a price comparison or a feature comparison, because the idea is a commercial search leads to a transaction. So if they don't necessarily find what they're looking for now, they may come back, bookmark it, and then they'll go buy on the next search. So understanding your marketing funnel, it gets a little more complicated than that, but if you have your marketing funnel, you need to know where these these search criteria are landing, if you're getting that detailed with your marketing. If you're not, don't worry about it. Just try to figure out how to get people to your website based on what they're looking for. On the transactional side, so these are people that are ready to buy. You've got car insurance quote, buy groceries online, flights to Miami, Uber Eats promo codes. You can get coupon codes. Now, I don't want you to get caught up trying to figure out getting it right. The idea is use the keyword modifiers and try to find the different search criteria. When we get a little further along, we're going to talk about how you use Google Trends to validate said search criteria. So this is how we find our keywords. So I'm saying to you, go find your keywords, and your question to me might be, but how do I do that, Nalini? Let Google help you. So starting at the top, you can get ideas from Google for what to search for when you're actually searching. So there's something called a search prediction list. Here is an example of where I typed in SEO keywords, and before I could even hit enter, Google gave me this list of potential things that I should search for. Right away, I have roughly 10 keyword phrases that all start with SEO keywords, and then there's a whole lot of things at the end of it, and I may or may not need those, but I might think, maybe I want to write a blog about it. Maybe I need to include that on my website. I'm going to take all of those words and put them on my list before I can go validate them. That's 10 right there. There's also a section a little further down after you actually hit enter and you search called People Always Ask. Here are some questions that Google figured out that people are always asking. You've got what are SEO keywords? How do I write SEO keywords? What are examples of keywords? Now, what's really important in both the list that I just showed you and the list you're looking at right now is these are exact phrases. Any variations on these will produce different results. So it's very important that as you're making notes and making your SEO keywords list, that you're using them exactly as you're seeing them show up in Google. And then when you validate them, you may then create another variation. But it's really important, particularly around people also ask. This is things that are exactly what people are looking for on the internet. The same with the Google prediction list, except the Google prediction list might be slightly off based on how Google's just kind of guessing at what you're looking for. But this is a really important section to leverage. Another place that you can find keyword ideas is at the bottom of the page. So you've typed in something, you've got some results at the top, you've got people also ask, then you scroll all the way down, and before you can go to page 2, because most of us aren't going to page 2, there's these list of other search ideas. This is another 8 right here that I could potentially use as SEO keywords. I mean, the irony is the word is SEO keywords, but these are other keyword phrases that I can now use to build out a list, write a blog on it, write it right into my website, right? Here's another 8. So I had 10 at the top, then I had 3 in the middle, now I have 8. Right? So all of a sudden I have 21 keywords, and all I started with was SEO keywords. I started with 2, put it in search, and I have 21 to now go validate. So this is how you have Google help you figure it out. It is guesswork, but it's more of an educated guesswork. You can figure out what people are searching for. You can figure out if it's worth coding for those keywords. Then you want to use Google Trends and Google Keyword Planner to validate them. We're going to go take a look at an example in a moment. So here's why you want to use Google Trends. Here's a screenshot of Google Trends. If you go to trends.google.com, this is how you get to it. And this particular splash hasn't changed in all the years I've been using Google Trends. I've always wondered where, like, shouldn't this update based on what Google is searching for? Apparently their splash page doesn't. If you scroll a little further on their homepage, you will see what are current trends happening today. But the reason you use Google Trends is after you've now used Google search prediction and the people also ask and also suggested searches, you have this qualified list. Now what? You bring them to Google Trends, you start to see how this might play out for you. You're going to learn what people in your target market are searching for information about. You're going to be able to see what topics are currently capturing the public imagination. This is really important because trends and topics matter. If there's a current trending topic that you can relate to, that you can jump on, whether it's a blog, a social media post, that's really important. You're also going to be able to determine if seasonal trends affect your business. It's really important. For example, certain businesses have seasonalities to it. And as a business owner, you know this, but did you know that Google search has seasonalities to it? People only search for certain things at certain times a year. For example, like in the holiday period, to use Christmas as an example, for those who celebrate Christmas, they might type into Google Christmas gifts for dad. or they might just type in gifts for dad. If you think about it, Father's Day is this weekend, and you've got gifts for dad probably trending the last month. And then if you think about December, gifts for dad are probably trending in December as well, because those are two times where across the board, across large swaths of America and other parts of the world, they're searching for the same thing. So this is where seasonality matters if you have a product that falls into that bucket. Not to say that people won't be searching at other times of the year, but you're going to know where the spikes are and where you're going to have the most competition, because that's the other side of it. It's the competitiveness, is that if other people who are just as competitive in that space are using the same keywords and they have more trust, authority, and relevance, they're going to outrank you. So this is where it's important to know high ranking keywords, low ranking keywords. How do I figure out what to target? Here is an example where I use flower shops as a comparative study. So I went into Google Trends, I typed in flower shop, flowers for mom, and gifts for mom. Now you see here, there's an interest over time graph. This is really important to understand. And the reason for that is that, for example, you can see the 3 search criteria at the top, and flower shop being blue has a steady line across the interest over time. The yellow one for gifts for mom, somewhere in the middle, you also have spikes. And then flowers for mom, there's a small little spike, but for the most part, it's flat. Now, a question I get very often is, what does 100 mean? It's a volume index from Google. If you click over the little question mark, it doesn't tell you anything really meaningful or important, or at least clarifying what it means, other than it's a volume. So Google's just decided that out of so many searches, it's 100. It's really unclear. They're not saying there were 100 searches, but it seems to be out of a volume of 100. So whatever factor or algorithm they're using to determine this, all you're trying to figure out is this a keyword that's searched for? If you get something that says not enough data, that means that's definitely not a performing keyword phrase, because there would be at least some data on it. If you get a flat line where like you have flowers for mom, where it's mostly flat all the way, chances are you might not want to use that for your keywords, or at least your primary keywords, but you maybe want to use it someplace else just in case, because there was a small little blip on the graph. We see a spike here in the graph, and if you look at the dates, this was taken last year, you'll see that the spike correlates to what looks like Mother's Day. That looks about May. Flower shop, gifts for mom, flowers for mom, spiking in that same window makes total sense. There's another spike over here on the right side where flower shop starts trending up again towards the end of, well, what should be February. This is a 12-year mark, and that makes total sense. Valentine's Day is coming up. So that's when people are more likely to be searching for flowers for mom, flower shops. But if you look at the yellow, and I don't think I have an arrow for the yellow, I apologize. I don't have an arrow for the yellow, but you notice that the yellow goes up, plateaus a little bit, meaning the search stays that way for a while, which are gifts for mom, and then it drops off sharply. So what that means is that correlates to November, December. That's holiday shoppers. Those are people looking for gifts for mom. And then immediately after the holidays end, that drops off immediately. The rest of these might be people looking for gifts for mom throughout the year for different reasons, birthdays, celebrations, and not necessarily just Mother's Day and Christmas, or flower shops being just for Valentine's Day. So this is where we talk about seasonality being important. Now, this doesn't necessarily change anything that you do, but it is important to understand it so that you could figure out how your website traffic ebbs and flows and how you target. So if I took the same flower shop example and I drill down a little further, this is in your Google reports. If you scroll down to Google Trends reports, you'll see this. You have interest by subregion. So this gives you like a state breakdown in terms of where the popularity of those search terms is. This particular section, the interest by subregion, I always say take with a grain of salt. And the reason for that is I have found in over the years of doing this is that this particular data can be skewed. Sometimes we don't see search criteria for Connecticut because one, Connecticut is small, so we don't have the volume. But two, a lot of times now people are using incognito browsers. People are turning off all the privacy settings and cookie trackings. I mean, I do, I don't know if you do. So a lot of those type of privacy measures that we're taking impacts the search results because Google's not able to gather that data. They have to get it somewhere else, whether they're getting it from your service provider or from the cell phone company. It's a bit unknown. They're going through data brokers if they themselves aren't the data broker. So the interest by subregion might be slightly skewed. So don't be alarmed if that particular report is empty. If you have data at the top and you have data in the bottom, you're okay. So let's take a look at what that data in the bottom looks like. So before we leave Arizona and South Dakota, let's take a look further down. Under flower shop, we have corsage as a trending topic here. It's a related topic. And if you notice, it's 250 times more or an increase in terms of relation to flower shop. So if you're a flower shop and you have a website and you don't have a page for corsages and you sell corsages, I would strongly recommend you create a page for corsages because corsages is a topic that people are very much interested in. It also shows up over here on related queries. It's another indicator that this is a really important keyword that you probably should use that also has a 250% increase over just the word flower shop. Now, there are other things in here that may not matter that you can dismiss. Morgan Weller, American singer. Don't know who that is. The Flower Shop, a pub in New York City. That would be a navigational search, right? So here's a good example of where flower shop, which is probably informational or commercial, or maybe even transactional, could also be a navigational search because there is a place called the flower shop. But again, if your business is not called the flower shop, I would dismiss that. And under related queries, we also see some of that overlap. So you do have to use some type of discernation to figure out, okay, do I really want to use this keyword or not? Does it apply to me or not? So as we take a look at the report a little further, right? I clicked on corsage, the topic from the previous page, and it brought me here. And I'm now looking at a graph that over time, corsages are performing, but there's these two really big spikes in the graph. So the first spike looks to be around May, June, that looks like prom season. That makes sense. Then there's another big spike in the graph in October, September, October. Now I don't have children, so I wasn't sure what this was. I had to go dig around the internet and realize that's homecoming. The school I went to, we didn't have homecoming, so it totally just went over my head. But for a business that has a flower shop that sells corsages, there's 2 times a year where corsages are going to be really important to their search. So that's prom season and homecoming season. Going back now to the corsage report, and I skipped over those subregions because that doesn't really matter right now. And I went right to the related topic. Here are some things I see under related topic. Homecoming, prom. What side does the boutonniere go on? How do you wear a corsage for homecoming? Homecoming corsage ideas. And if you look, there's both on the left side, there's still 13 topics in total to investigate. And on the right side, there's 25 queries to investigate. So topics are a breakdown of like what I like to call your, well, not just me in the SEO world, it's called your head term. It's a term at the top of the house where you're just kind of going, how do I know where I dig a little further? When you have the right side, which are queries, these are exact phrases people are searching for. Remember that people also search for. This is where some of it is coming from. Now, if I had a blog, these are 3 blogs right there that you can write. If you have social media and you're looking for content ideas, 3 ideas right there. And if you actually look, there's even corsage and boutonniere sets for prom. You might even get out of this whole list another 20 ideas for keyword phrases. Now, they may not all need to be individual blogs. They could be titles on sections on a page. So for example, if you had a page dedicated to corsages, given that corsages are a big deal in the flower shop world, you now have a couple of ideas that fall into the tips and tricks, best practices maybe, right? These are things that people are looking for. So you want to make sure you have that content on your website. Another thing that you can use, it's called Google Keyword Planner. Now, for those of you who were in class last week, and let me back up, Google Trends is a free tool that anybody can use. You don't need a Gmail address. You don't need an email address at all. You could just go to trends.google.com and anybody can use it. Google Keyword Planner, you do need a Gmail account. You also may need to set up a Google AdWords account and connect a credit card to it. The reason for that is is Google Keywords Planner is primarily used to feed your Google Ads, the Google AdWords account. Now, I don't particularly play around in Google Keyword Planner. And the reason for this is I am not a Google Ads expert. I don't pretend to be. I know organic keywords and I know organic search and I stay in that space. I have heard too many horror stories from people who have used Google Ads and the ads were misconfigured and Google charged them $2,000, $3,000 plus dollars. And because it's pay-per-click, that money is owed. There is no arguing with Google. You sign the terms and conditions. Me personally, I'm a little accident prone and I don't trust myself not to click the wrong button. The next thing you know, I'm accruing a bill with Google. So that's why I tend to stay out of the Google Keyword Planner. Now, if you are adventurous and you're willing to give it a try, the Keyword Planner is a really good place to figure out high performing, low performing keywords. If you look at this Jiffy, that's moving a little too fast, unfortunately, but the third column says competition. Here's where you could see if it's low or a high or a medium keyword. Sometimes a highly competitive keyword isn't worth using because if your competition is going to be so strong that you can't even rank, why aim for that keyword? Sometimes it's better to aim for a low or a medium. And other times you may just say, I'm going to take that highly competitive keyword, put it on my website with the understanding that it still may not rank in Google for that particular keyword, but it may rank for other keywords. Because remember, all your content is related and Google is using all of this to kind of infer whether or not your website is where somebody should go for the information they're looking for. When you're looking at the same Jiffy, on the right side, you can actually see the value. Now, this is in pounds because this was a Jiffy I found on the internet. It wasn't in US dollars, but you can see some of these keywords are valued at from less than $1, 50 cents or less, 20 cents on and down, and all the way up to on the high end, $13, $15, $20. This is where the pay-per-click can become dicey if you decide to do pay-per-click because you're bidding on that keyword and it's what's called the market value. So as the popularity increases, the cost of using that keyword also increases. And again, if you are going to use Google Ads, I strongly recommend you get an expert in the field because those are the folks that'll be able to make sure that this is done right. They could also help you navigate Google Keyword Planner to figure out some of these more niche keywords specifically. When you're using Google Keyword Planner, you can enter words, phrases, or URL related to your business, and Google will give you the keyword suggestions. So all that little homework we did, you don't necessarily have to do that. Google can help you with that. But again, free versus, the potential costly manner, it's up to you. You can enter up to 10 seed, these are called your seed keywords. You can enter up to 10 at a time. So you can start doing some of that comparison and figuring out, how do I get there? How do I rank? Those type of things. For each of these searches, you'll see the average monthly searches, which are in the middle. I mean, that these are looking from anyway from 10K to 100K. And I'm hoping that it breaks it down a little deeper than that, because telling me that something was searched 10,000 times in a month versus 100,000 times in a month, I don't particularly find that helpful, but a Google Ads expert may say differently. You're going to see how competitive the word is. You're also going, or phrase, and you'll also be able to see the bid for it, whether it's high and low in that space. And if you do decide to do this, your clicks are going to rank somewhere in there. So now that you've kind of done this homework, you've identified your keywords, you're like, okay, I have my giant list from Google, I have my search predictions, I know what my keyword list is. Now what? Where do I put it? Now, for those of you who come to the basics class, I covered at a really high level, but I'll give you a couple examples now for how to make the best of those keywords. So the first thing you want to do is write content geared towards your keywords. So remember the corsage example. There were specific questions around what side to put a boutonniere on, corsages and boutonniere matching. And I forget what the third one is right off the top of my head. But right there, those are two types of content. Those were two questions being asked of Google with a very, very strong volume of questions. You probably want to write content geared towards that. So that's what it means to write content geared towards your keywords. You want to match your title and meta. And actually, I'm going to skip ahead because this has the wrong screenshot on it. This one has the right screenshot on it. So here you're going to have your title and your meta description. So if you've not seen this before, you're not familiar with it. When you go to Google, and in this case, I typed in a navigational search for edge space marketing, and I have the title, which says edge space marketing, digital marketing, small business, and it tapers off because I use more characters than was in the space. That's okay, but you tend to want to stay in the characters. Underneath that is I have this 1 to 2 sentence line that also tapers off because Google continues to reduce the number of characters we can use in that space. And this was written a while ago. I now have called my meta description in that box. Now, your meta is where you're putting a teaser. And a lot of times this is where people go a little wrong. You want to be careful that the title that you use and the meta description that you fill in actually matches the criteria that's on the page. If you put a different title and a meta description because you're trying to keyword stuff, and when someone goes to that page, the content doesn't match, one of two things will happen. Either you've got it so wrong that it worked, that someone shows up and they found something else they're looking for, which doesn't happen very often, or they come to your website, your title and description told them to expect one thing, they get there, they find something else, they're not happy, and they leave. Remember earlier I said about user satisfaction? That's the point. So here I'm talking about a digital marketing one-stop shop for all your needs. We help small businesses and nonprofits reach their clients digitally. Now, I'm actually, as an SEO expert, will tell you that is not necessarily the strongest keyword phrasing that I could have used, but that's deliberate. I do that deliberately for my business because I don't particularly get traffic from Google. And when traffic I do get from Google just doesn't fit my business model. So instead, I have it there so that Google has enough information on the website. Someone looking for my business has enough information to want to come to my website. And when they come to my website, that actually matches. The next thing you want to think about is your H1 and H2 on the page. And I do get this question often, what is your H1? What is your H2? How do I know what it is? This is the H1 on my page. For every page on your website, there should be only one H1. If you want to think about back in the days, whether it's high school or college, and we used to write papers, papers always had a title and then it had sections, right? Whether it's, section 1, whether it's chapters, however you wanted to call it. And in your table of contents, they probably had a numbering system, whether it's 1, Roman numeral 2, whatever it was, but there was a hierarchy. Your website is no different. So at the top of every page, you have an H1. And in my case, my H2 is here. You can have multiple H2s. You can have multiple H3s. Just make sure that your hierarchy makes sense. So in my case, my H1 says advance your business with edge space marketing. The only keyword in there is a navigational search intent for edge space marketing, right? So this is deliberate. I know what I'm trying to say. That is more or less my tagline. And I am okay with taking the hit on the H1 tag. On the H2 tag, it says digital marketing for small businesses. So if you've been following along, that is an exact keyword phrase, right? And I'm sure if I do this again, I'll find other keyword phrases to put there, but I'm comfortable with that. On my homepage, I actually have 3 other places that I have H2 tags there that have titles that match keyword searches. Now, to be very clear, for those of you who are building your website yourself, or if you have a web developer, it's always important to ask, where's the H1 tag? Where's the H2 tag? Often people cheat and they make the font just bigger, bolder, brighter, and that's okay. But Google is anticipating that it's in an H1 tag and H2 tag. And if you're using a builder like WordPress or Wix or Squarespace, you can actually just pull it from the drop down and you'll notice that your font and stuff changes accordingly. Other ways that you want to take advantage of your keywords is to rename files with keyword phrases before uploading. So what does that mean? That means that when you get a file, whether you license it from iPhoto, iStock, Adobe, wherever you're licensing your photos from, Adobe that I use, we license from Adobe, and it comes down as Adobe _ and the file name and maybe some other gibberish. I could upload that file as is, but there's no qualifying information to help Google understand what that photo's about, what my website's about. But if I rename that file to say digital marketing Stanford, web development for small businesses, I don't know, SEO best practices, all of these are now keywords that I have fed to Google on the file name as I upload it. So this is really important because sometimes when I look at websites, very often about 80% of the time, I see things like image underscore gibberish 12345. And the file name's fine technically by like that, but there's no keyword value if you don't rename the files. A more advanced step is after you've renamed your file and uploaded it to Google, not Google, your website. After you've uploaded it to your website, you have what's called the alt text. This is also known as alternative text. This space is primarily used for ADA compliance for folks with e-readers, and it's essentially a caption of what the photo is about. A person walking a dog, a person typing on the computer, right? However, there's still room to add your keywords. Describe the image, put a comma, and then put in 1 to 2 keyword phrases. That is completely okay because you're satisfying the ADA compliance in the beginning, then you're adding your keywords at the end. Just make sure if you're going to use the space, you satisfy your ADA compliance because that's very important. And for folks that depend on e-readers, it's only fair that they're able to understand. And this is the service they're looking for. We should meet them where they're because at the end of the day, they are also your end users. So here are some best practices to take with you as you think about your keywords, as you think about how you build your website and what you do with your content. When someone is looking for information, make sure your post or page is informational when people are looking for information. I know that sounds really redundant, and you're probably saying, Nalini, why are you telling me this? Because it is so often that I'm looking for information on something. The snippet, the meta tells me that the information I'm looking for is going to be there. I click the button, I go to the website, and nothing about what I'm looking for is actually on that website. And it's really frustrating from a user perspective. One of two things will happen. I will either remember the name of your website and never come back to you the next time I'm searching for something, because I'll remember that I went to that website and it was a waste of my time, even though it was only 10 seconds, that's still my 10 seconds, right? And a lot of your users are thinking that way. The other thing that's happening is that bounce, that was a bounce, someone came, didn't find what they're looking for, and they left, is now listed in Google, you know, your bounce rate, right? It is now driving up your bounce rate. Google is making note of the fact that, you know, people are coming to their website, not finding what they're looking for and leaving. Google's algorithm or robots, however you want to call it, will then look at your meta and look at your content and say, oh, these two things don't match, and automatically start ranking you for that keyword. And that's why it's so important for when I talk about quality and content, right? They have to match and it has to make sense. When someone is searching navigationally for your business, you want to be the first search results when someone is searching for your business name or your company name. This could be challenging if you have a very competitive business name. So for example, I worked with someone, the name of her business was also the name of a university. That university has thousands of pages. It's also a university. So automatically it has more pages than her 7-page website. So there's more room to include keywords. It has trust and authority automatically from Google because it's an EDU, it's a university, it's been around a really long time. It's just automatically given preferential treatment by Google in the ranking factors because it has trust and authority. And now her small little business that has the same name, we tried really hard. We managed to get her on page 2, but that university had just had so many pages because if you think of all the departments and, you know, alumni offices and then all the sub pages for those just kept showing up, and her little business kept getting pushed all the way out to page 6, 7, or 8 until we had to then say, okay, a navigational search may not work. We'll do everything we can, but it's not working. All we can do is target the other keywords around it. So this is why when they tell you to search for your business name, this is why it's important to check your competition, because if your competition, just like if your competition is Macy's and Amazon for certain things, you're never going to outrank them. They're automatically going to have that authority and trust over your small website. Commercial. Provide content that helps people make an informed decision when they're still investigating their options. So my attempt at that on my website was the website cost calculator. Still not working out very well. I can tell you from looking at my reports, there's definitely a high bounce rate on that, because I often get questions around, well, how much should I budget when I want to build a website? But it's not a straightforward answer because it all depends on what you're looking for. Do you want Wix versus WordPress? Do you already have your domain name? Do you need to buy your domain name? Does the hosting plan you're looking at include an SSL certificate? So these are questions that I know people are going to have, and I attempted to answer them and help them make an informed decision. Now, personally, just from my own experience, I know that it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, and there's still room to improve it. But, it's lower on the list of things to do, right? But for you, you don't want to lower that. You want to make that really important, especially if you depend on SEO and it's an opportunity to help them make informed decisions. I mean, going back to the flower shop example, simple as which side do you wear the boutonniere on? Apparently that was a big question. I do know from recent experience that pinning a boutonniere as an art into itself, that could be something that if you're doing social media marketing, you can do a social media post showing people this is how you pin a boutonniere. This is how you pin a corsage, or tying a bow tie. Anybody ever tried to tie that and know that it's kind of like crumpled up and you can't figure out how to do it? Those are all examples of helping people make an informed decision. It sounds silly, but it's such an important part of your SEO. And then lastly, transaction. Lead people to the sale pages if they're looking to buy one of your products. It is so often that I am looking to buy something and I'm navigating on someone's website. The search says, buy a water bottle. I click on it, I go to buy the water bottle, and it takes me to some other page that I have to scroll all the way down and figure out where the button is to get to buy this water bottle. Unless I really, really want to buy that water bottle, I am not scrolling, hunting, or searching for it. Do not bury these things behind a paywall. I've also seen people do this, or a registration wall. If it's a free product that you're giving away, don't make someone sign up for an account just to even see the details of the product. Same with your services. There are classes often that people will set up and say, oh, come to my workshop. You click the link to go to the website to see the details of the workshop, and what happens? You have to now register or sign in before you can even see the details. I'm not signing up for an account. I don't want anything that bad to sign up for another account to get another set of spam emails just to see the details. So this is where you have to be very careful about those barriers that you create when people want to buy something, because if they cannot find it, they have to really, really want it in order to continue down that path. Chances are they're going to go to another website. They're going to go to your competition who made it easier for them to see the details, and they're more likely to buy. And again, people will often remember their bad experience more than their good experience. So that's why that's very important. Lastly, you want to build a list of 10 to 25 keywords and phrases. As I mentioned before, you saw Google gave me about 20 just looking up one 2-word keyword phrase and then start validating it. The reason you want to build this list is because you don't want to repeat the same keywords on every page. That's called keyword stuffing, and Google will shadow ban you. Shadow ban means you will not show up for the search results, even though you probably meet every other ranking factor. Google is penalizing you for overusing the keywords and not varying it and not doing this research. So that's why it's important to have some variation to the keywords so that you can use the same intention in a different way if there's a different way to say it. So going back to my early example of small digital marketing for small business versus digital marketing for small businesses versus small business marketing. Those are 3 different variations on the same keyword with the same essentially keyword intention. And as I just mentioned, try your variation of the phrases. So I'm going to open it up now to questions. I know one came through earlier, so I see 2 here. So let's take a look. So the first one is, how do I know my sitemap was submitted correctly? So the answer is you go to your Google Search Console, and on the left side of the screen, there's actually a button called Sitemaps. And when you click Sitemaps, you'll actually see your sitemap there that you submitted, and it'll actually say success or fail or error. Google will tell you exactly whether or not it was indexed and they were able to read it. The next question is, do you work with small businesses one-on-one? Yes, I do work with small businesses and nonprofit, and we do help you figure out and navigate what's the next best step for your business. This next question is related to the title and meta description. So the question is, where on WordPress do you put the title and meta description? And Is it possible to look at someone else's website and see the title and meta description? If so, how and where? That's a really good question as well. So the first things first is that if you have a WordPress website, I recommend the Yoast plugin, Y-O-A-S-T. It's a free plugin. There's a paid version, but we use Yoast across all of our clients' website. And on every page, whether it's your homepage, about us page, even your post pages for your blogs, at the bottom of the page, you should have a place to put in the page title and the meta. Now, that's if you're using the classic editor. If you're using the Gutenberg block editor, it's a little trickier, and actually I'm going to do a reel on it later tonight to kind of give an example of where to find it, because it is a little buried and you might have to Google where do I find it on my website. But if you use the Yoast plugin, they also have their own tutorials to walk you through that. The second part of the question is it possible to look at someone else's website, see the title and meta description? So the first part of that question, there's two ways to do it. You can go to Google and type in the word site, S-I-T-E, colon, and then www.whatever the website is.com. And Google will actually give you a listing of what it has indexed for that website. So you'll be able to see the title and the meta. That's one way that you can do it. Another way that you can do it, this is a little bit more technical and can be a little bit more precise though, is that when you load the website, when you right click anywhere on the page, you'll see something called inspect. When you click inspect, it opens up a panel, at least in the Chrome browser, it opens up a panel on the right, and that panel will dump the entire website to code, and you'll just have to be able to read in the code where the title and the meta description is. So that might be trickier if you're not too technical and you don't quite understand the code. It's just easier to go to Google and type in the word site, colon, and then the name of the website and see what you get. So that's how you can tell what your competition or what other websites are doing. The question is, will the slides be available after the call? So the slides will be available on YouTube with the recording so that you can go through them at your own pace. All right, we've got about 5 more minutes. Any last questions, thoughts? I know sometimes this can be really confusing and technical, and so feel free to ask away. There are no silly questions because everyone has a different technical understanding, and sometimes even for myself, I still read things and go, what did that say? And then I have to go read something else to break it down a little further. All right, while you guys are thinking, I will share with you my contact details in case you want to get in touch with other questions that you may have. So it's a really good question in the chat. What sites do you follow to keep up with SEO? So I actually attend a lot of these webinars on my own. So I tend to go see whenever I see an SEO webinar pop up. I read the blogs from Moz, M-O-Z, SEMrush, RFs are also good resources in this space. So I just tend to Google the topics regularly to see if there's anything new. Sometimes even before class, I will go search like what's keyword intent, and I'll just go read through some of the blogs to see if there's anything new, anything's changed. Things change so fast and so frequently that sometimes you just have to read and reread. And sometimes I catch things the second time around, but Moz, RF, SEMrush, those are some of the leaders in the space. Awesome. Somebody said they're going to find the class on YouTube. So another question we just got is, for location of keywords, are we talking only about in the title and meta description on the back end, or are headers, subheaders, body copy, and the page also considered? It's a very good question. The answer is all of it is considered. So you have your title and your meta that I showed you, and then on the back end, and then on the front end, so this is where we talk about on page, off page SEO, you have your headers, which are your H1 to H2s, subheadings and body copy. Yes, they are all considered. They all count. And as I mentioned before, you want to make sure your content flows together. So whatever your title and your meta is, you want to make sure that on the website itself, the page that you led them to from with that title and meta matches up. I hope that answers your question. Still got a couple more minutes. Any last burning questions or thoughts on SEO? Since there's only a few of us and we have a couple of minutes left, do you want to put in the chat where your different websites are so we can see if there's anything particular around your particular platform? Maybe it'll trigger like a last quick tip or trick. Is it WordPress, Squarespace, Shopify, Wix, something else. One of the things that I would always say is like, so Squarespace. Squarespace is a good example of, they give you places to put in your title and your meta description. It does take a little Googling to figure out where it is. Shopify, Wix, they all give you the space to do that. For folks that have custom built websites, meaning somebody custom coded it for you. So it's, even if it's a WordPress with custom coding, you may not have access to fill in your title and your meta, and you may need to just check on your developers or inspect the code yourself and figure it out. I recently worked with a client, and when I was doing an SEO audit, we realized that a whole bunch of sections on the pages, they just made the font bigger. They didn't put in the H1, H2 tags. And when we had them fix it, we started seeing some results in Google in terms of better performance. So it's always a good idea to check on that. And even if you built it yourself, double check that you didn't do it wrong. Squarespace, I doubt you did it wrong, because Squarespace is very limited in how you can do those things. So pretty sure that's done right. So you want to take a look at your H1 and such, because they do spell it out for you in Squarespace. All right, as I wrap up, thank you all so much for joining me today. This has been a great class. This is the last of our series of 3. So to recap, in case you missed it, we had SEO basics, where we talked about your ranking factors. Some of the questions asked today may be worth going back and checking out that class to just see what your ranking factors are and see if you understand the technicalities in that space. I'll caveat it now before you go watch the class, if you plan to, is that it can get very technical, and I always recommend take away 1 to 2 things. Don't worry about trying to understand it all unless you're, trying to be an SEO expert and you have the technical background. Go for it. But if it's not really your expertise and you're just trying to make it work for your business, take 1 to 2 things away and implement those, and you'll start to find little drips of changes happening over time. Will be good. We also then had a class on Google tools. So this is where we covered analytics, Search Console, Google My Business, and we did cover Google Trends and Google Keyword Planner briefly, like we did today. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And the question is where to find those classes. They're all on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, either under the Darien library, they'll be there. There's also past classes of the same version I've taught a few different times are also on Google, YouTube. So again, thank you everyone for joining me tonight. I hope you had a really good class with me and you understood a few things more about how to understand your keyword intent. Thanks everyone, and we'll talk soon.